Mmm. Look at buddy. You're always in the way, aren't you? Well, Joe, that was very good, but what game did we miss?
Well, we missed Battle Ace, Dave. It's a game that pretty much everyone who's played it says kind of sucks, but I've never played it, so I'll have to take their word for it, I guess.
Was on the Jaguar also?
No. And we also missed the two bi-compatible games, Darius Plus and Darius Alpha. When played on the Super Graphics, they have slightly better graphics, maybe a few extra layers of scrolling or whatnot. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I would too, but they're very expensive.
Well, send us one of those, please, everybody, so we can try them out. Anyways, let's move on to the Jaguar. And I've just got to say, Joe, that I've always felt that Atari made the highest quality system and the best games out there.
Really?
No, not really. Are you kidding?
Oh, poor Atari.
Yeah, they are very poor. So, well, let's take a look at the Jaguar.
The Atari Jaguar was released in late 1993, hot on the heels of the new 3DO and well before Sega's 32X add-on. Atari went to great lengths to advertise the Jaguar as a 64-bit system. Was it? Well, kind of, but not really. Some aspects were 64-bit, like the memory bus, but Atari justified it all by asking people to do the math. In all honesty, fitness doesn't matter. The system itself felt fairly solid, though the AV port on the back of the system was simply an exposed circuit board. This definitely added an element of cheapness. The system used cartridges which could be as large as 48 mega power. Later, a CD-ROM drive was released, which looked odd. Only 13 games would be released for it, though. The controller was also odd, offering a keypad with overlays for additional button controls. There was an 8-button controller released as well. Overall, the Jaguar had 71 games released for accounting CDs and around 130 games that were planned but never came out. The system was a commercial and critical failure and was discontinued in 1996.
Joe, I am so pumped to play some Jaguar.
Oh, me too, me too! Let's rock and roll! Cybermorph was the game that came included with the Jaguar system.
Imagine all the disappointed kids when they knew that this game was a packing game. I would have rather had nothing.
Basically, the game consists of a 3D world where you fly around trying to find little yellow pods for whatever reason and then get to the exit. If the enemies get in your way, then it's your job to shoot them down. You've got to do this on many different planets before the entire universe is safe. One button makes you go forward, another backwards, and they counter each other out as well, acting as brakes. The middle button shoots. The control's alright, but I find myself wondering where I learned to fly.
Where did you learn to fly?
I don't know.
Where did you learn to fly?
I don't know.
Where did you learn?
I don't know! The graphics are pretty bland and could easily be surpassed by the 32X. I don't think the game is as bad as Dave thinks it is, and I did experience a little bit of enjoyment with it.
You're such a liar. I can't imagine anybody really enjoying this game or even having a nostalgic moment of enjoyment. I'm sorry, guys, but this game is just bad.
Next up is Wolfenstein 3D. This was one of the first first-person shooters ever, at least the first massively popular one. The Jaguar version turned out pretty good. It's easy to get into despite my disdain for the genre. It does seem to run a little bit too fast, but that's okay, I suppose. The graphics are, well, Wolfenstein, and they haven't really been improved from what I can tell. They are full screen, however. Overall, an enjoyable effort.
I'm pretty darn sure this is my favorite game on the Jaguar. I found it very enjoyable. The control scheme is really easy to learn and worked really well. The graphics were blocky, but everything was discernible. The pictures of Hitler were spot on. A total blockhead, just like the real guy.
Even riding came to the Jaguar. We covered this game briefly back in episode 32, which was called Some Notable Vertical Shooters, but we'll take another quick look at it here. It's a fairly decent version of the game. It plays okay, but there seems to be more enemies on the screen than other versions. The graphics are decent enough, and the music has that Amiga mod sound with the hard-panned instruments, with none of them being in the center. There's a new musical tune that shows up in Stage 3. I don't know if there are any more or not. Firing the weapon seems to take a lot of effort with the stiff buttons on the Jaguar pad.
This is where I found out how uncomfortable the Jaguar controller was. After playing Raiden on other systems, I felt this controller didn't really help as my thumb started to ache after a short time of button pushing.
I never cared much for this game, though I do admire its ambition. This version doesn't seem to make any improvements over the 16-bit versions other than the sound quality.
I also am not a huge fan of Flashback. I do like the style of gameplay, but I would rather play games like Heart of Darkness, Blackthorn, or any of the Oddworld games. At least this made it to the Jaguar, unlike the other ones.
Can you tell much of a difference between the Jaguar and this Genesis version? Does this mean the Genesis is every bit as powerful as the Jaguar? You decide. Tempest 2000 is one of the holy grails of the Jaguar.
I don't understand this.
Basically, you're a wireframe and your goal is to blow up other wireframes on a wireframe board. I've never been a huge fan of the original Tempest, and to be honest, I can only play this version for about 5 or 10 minutes before I become disinterested. I think the lack of a rotary controller hurts the gameplay, to be honest, but I was surprised that they do make them. I'm not sure if they're official or not.
It was kind of cumbersome moving your ship or whatever it is around the corners. I always got stuck and therefore ended up dying.
Yeah, what they did with this game is pretty good. It's just not up my alley. I always have a hard time when the enemy gets outside the border of the playfield. I'm not sure how to kill it, and I usually get caught. I have survived that situation before, though. I just have no idea how I did it. The music is pretty good, or at least some of it is.
Yeah, I like the driving beats.
I think this should have been a packing game, honestly. Checkered Flag is a Formula One style racing game. The first time you see images of Sega's Virtua Racing instantly spring to mind.
Yeah, and a little bit of Stunt Race FX also.
Then you realize that this game is a turd in comparison. The control is very twitchy. The courses themselves are not very interesting, and many of them look the same. The flat polygons are ancient by today's standards, and Virtua Racing on the 32X blows it away. Even the regular old Genesis version of Virtua Racing with the SVP chip plays better. But if there was no Virtua Racing to compare this to, would this game be any good?
Nope. The game stands on its own merit. It's only as good as the effort the developers put into the game.
This game isn't unplayable, it's just a rather poor imitation of better games. Poor imitation, here's Fight for Life. Yep, this was their attempt at a Virtua Fighter clone. I remember Sam Tramiel, who was in charge of Atari at the time, saying that the Jaguar is at least as powerful as the Saturn. Really? Because this game really doesn't look any better than the 32X version of Virtua Fighter. And it certainly plays much worse.
And what's with the life bars popping in and out? That's a huge distraction for me. Also, the synthesized guitar is very unpleasant to my ears.
It's very slow and the control is just awful. Don't bother yourself with this one.
Okay, I won't.
Iron Soldier was one of the higher profile polygon games for the system, I think.
Well, these title screen graphics look really good.
Yeah, basically it's a mech game where you wander around a large area destroying enemies.
Maybe I spoke too soon. This looks really bad. I mean, it may have been okay back in the day, but it really isn't much better looking than Cybermorph.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of a poor man's Metalhead. That's a similar mech game on the 32X.
Even that looks better.
Anyway, the gameplay here in Iron Soldier is rather slow. You need to press and hold the A button while pressing the directional pad to adjust your walking speed. You can't aim and fire at the same time. There are more functions, but you gotta look at the overlay to figure them out, and who has time to read all this? There seems to be tons of enemies to destroy in each level. It's not the worst game ever by any means, but it just takes some getting used to.
At least the music is good. I've got to admit that.
Yeah, it is pretty good. Overall, it's a bland-looking, nice-sounding game that offers some depth if you're willing to take the time to get into it.
Woo, it's getting hot. Gotta open the window.
Here we have Kasumi Ninja. Yep, Atari wanted a Mortal Kombat clone as well. But in this game, you choose your character and opponent in a weird 3D room for some reason. Yes, they even made choosing your character a chore. It's very slow and clunky.
At least they tried to be different, and I will give them credit for that, but it's very confusing.
Once you get into the actual game, you've got digitized characters, which were all the rage back in the day. And let's not forget the copious amounts of blood that's everywhere. The characters border on the ridiculous, with this game being best known for the guy who shoots fireballs from his kilt.
Yeah, that was a huge fail. Why is everyone supposed to like crap like that? It really degrades the game.
The control is alright, but it's still a bad Mortal Kombat game. I do like the line scrolling core, however. At least they got that right. The music is nothing special at all. This is Ultra Vortex.
Atari decided they wanted to go to the poor Mortal Kombat clone market, so we also got this fine gem.
It's even worse than Kasumi Ninja. Much worse, actually. Again, we have the digitized characters who bleed all over the place, but this time we sacrifice pretty much any semblance of actual gameplay. It's a very difficult game to control and actually win. Background graphics aren't bad, and the use of color is actually pretty good in spots, but they still look kind of cheesy in my opinion.
The backgrounds were by far the best part of this game. I liked all the different types of skulls.
The music is dreadful synth guitar, which actually makes playing this game even less pleasant. Sad excuse for a driving game. You start out driving what appears to be a toy car around collecting little globules of energy or something like that. In this sense, it reminds me of Toy Commander on the Dreamcast, only far less interesting.
Were they really serious with a game like this? I know times have changed since then, but I can't imagine people being too happy with these undetailed and glitchy visuals even when it was new.
Yeah, no kidding, right? You can drive real cars later, but the gameplay remains the same from what I can tell. There is music in this game, surprisingly, but it is certainly nothing noteworthy. I just got bored with this one really fast.
Yeah, Joe, Club Drive is definitely a club I don't want to belong to. Alien vs. Predator is one of the other holy grails for the Jaguar. In this game, you can choose to play as an alien, a predator, or a colonial marine. Playing as a predator, you're wandering around, killing humans and stuff. It's actually very hard to kill humans here, even when they're right in front of you. Playing as an alien, you have 3 attacks, which makes killing humans much easier, but it's still pretty tough. And the humans are all up in your ass in this game, and it's really easy to die. The best way to play is as the colonial marine. You've got some Duke Nukem style too. Okay, not quite Duke Nukem, but Tube was required for pretty much all games back then. You've also got a shotgun, which is really easy to use. You wander around shooting aliens and grabbing ammo, food, and keys. Not much seems to really happen, and it does get kind of boring after a bit. The graphics are pretty good for the time, but the frame rate can be kind of choppy. Still, it at least showed that the Jaguar had some semblance of graphical power, which almost all of the other games failed to do. The music in this game is amazing. Oh wait, there's no music. After playing playing all the scenarios briefly, I'm not really impressed. A lot of boring corridor wandering and ultra blocky backgrounds isn't really entertaining. The controls are okay, but not near as good as Wolfenstein. The button overlays are a chore. It's almost impossible to strafe and shoot at your enemies while playing this game.
I guess if you have a 6-button controller, the strafing is a little easier, but we didn't have one of those when we played this.
It's hard to believe that this is one of the most coveted, enjoyable games on the system. It really says a lot about the system if this game is the cream of the crop. Wow, Joe, with games like that, it's really no wonder Atari isn't around anymore. I gotta say, I feel I probably pissed off a lot of Atari fans, and I'm sorry about that, I truly am, but I personally just don't see the attraction to the games or the system.
So you're saying you like the super graphics more than Jaguar?
Oh yes, I do. Even though the Super Graphics had a tiny library, I did enjoy it more than the games I played on the Jaguar, but even more importantly, I think the Virtual Boy is better than the Super Graphics.
Anyway, I definitely like the super graphics more than Jaguar as well. In fact, I think I even enjoyed the 32X library more than I did the Jaguar.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? The Virtual Boy is better than the 32X. So, yes, it is. It's made by Nintendo.
Anyway, we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Dave, what the hell are you talking about? There are no controllers on this table. Yes, there are. Where?
Right here.
Dude, how the hell did you do that, you freak?
With magic.
I like magic.
Yes, the magic you taught me.
Must have. So anyway, let's take a look at some of these fantastic controllers and some of the not so fantastic ones, and we'll tell you what we think about them.
Here we have the original PlayStation controller, which was, in my opinion, a very comfortable controller to hold with 2 awesome grips, 4 shoulder buttons, some crazy weird design with the buttons, X, square, triangle, circle, which originally you're thinking, what the hell is this crap? But actually made it pretty easy to memorize where the buttons were on the control pad. Later on, after Nintendo released their analog stick, Sony said, what the hell, we're going to release 2 of the analog sticks, and they put them on their revised PlayStation 1 controller. After that came the PlayStation 2, which, guess what? Nothing changed except for the color. It is now black and says DualShock 2. Ooh. And then, so what? Comes the PS3. You know what changes? Ooh, it's wireless now. It has a PS button and it has 6-axis control. And that's pretty much it. Sony is very happy with their controller, and so am I. I think it's very comfortable.
This is the N64 controller. This is the green version because it's Dave's. I would never buy the green version. But it has like 3 grips because, you're supposed to hold it like this when you play a 2D game, like, I suppose, and hold it like this when you're playing a 3D game with polygons. And it's fairly comfortable. It has a little D trigger over here, which is kind of cool. And, overall, it's functional. But what I don't like is the labeling. There's B, A, and these 4 buttons are C. And they're just like up, right, down, left. What the hell is up with that? That makes me very, very angry. It makes me want to murder somebody. I like that they have 2 versus 3, don't get me wrong, but to plug in another controller. You can just daisy chain like 500 or 600 of them together, and that's how you do multiplayer on a 3DO.
And here we have the Super UFO, which is the name of the controller of the Super Fan. It's a video 6-button controller for games such as Street Fighter 2 Turbo. It has 6 buttons that have turbos, and the turbo dipsticks are unbelievably hard to switch. This is a fairly cheap feeling controller, plastic. It moves around a lot with your hands. There's not much else to say except for this crazy battery compartment on the back side of it, which who knows what this is for. It takes 2 AAA batteries, and I'm guessing if your power goes out, your controller's still going to work, but if your power goes out, your TV is going to be up as well. And on the back cover of the battery compartment has this little nut, which is going to be touching the battery, so who knows what this is for. It's a very cheap design. I guess it worked for every game, but it's not working.
Here is the controller from the Atari Jaguar 64-bit system. It's very, very cumbersome to hold. This thing is huge. It has C, B, and A buttons. They're very, very steep. I really don't like that. And plus they're backwards, so I guess all Atari owners are dyslexic, just like all Nintendo owners. Plus it has probably one of the worst D-pads I've ever felt in my life. And it's just, your thumb's at an angle coming at it, and it just doesn't feel very natural at all. It's just standard buttons here, nothing really going on the back. And it has this keypad. Now, certain games would have overlays, depending on the game, which would have extra functions. And like when you're playing, a Street Fighter game on the Jag, the top row here is your 3 punches, and the bottom row here is your 3 kicks. So you got, your dragon punches or your oh wait, there's no Street Fighter game for the Jag. Who am I kidding? But this keypad, I mean, what happens if I start seeing random numbers here?
Just because I discovered the power of confidence, then you can too.
Oh, boy,
And here is the Virtual Boy controller, which is fairly comfortable to hold. It's got 2 really big grips on it for you. It's got 2 crazy directional pads and 4 buttons, which originally, when I first held this, I was like, hey, they were considering left and right-handed game players. But in actuality, I think most of the games only used for the left-handed game player with your left hand on the digital stick anyways. But it's fairly comfortable, but sadly there's only 14 games released in the US, so you really didn't have much time to use it.
Help you get there.
I just can't stop touching the Sega Saturn pad. It's very comfortable. In fact, this is probably my favorite controller ever made. The form factor, it's just perfect. The D-pad is the best ever made. The 2 rows of 3 buttons for a total of 6 buttons on the front is just perfect for fighting games or pretty much any type of game. The start button is a little bit rubbery, but who cares? How often do you press start? Like once every time you start the game? Yeah, that's it. And the shoulder buttons are fine. I really can't say enough good things about this, so I'll stop it here. I wonder what Dave thinks about this controller.
Joe, this is what I think of this controller. I approve. This is by far the most comfortable controller for the 32-bit, the current system controller ever. It's awesome. I don't care if it doesn't have analog sticks. It's freaking awesome.
This is the Sega Saturn 3D pad. All of the other pads were in 2D only, but this one is in 3D. It's an analog pad, and it kind of has a bit of a dead spot in the center, but it's not too bad. It's kind of mushy feeling. And these buttons are kind of shallow, and the D-pad is kind of rubbery, and it's just kind of weird, but it works pretty well for games like Knights, and especially Power Slave. And it has these analog triggers, so the further you press them down, the faster or further you move. It works really well in games like Power Slave. And it has a detachable cord, so that you can plug in your Dreamcast EMU from the future, see? Just like that. This is the Sega Saturn Mission Stick. And it's just an analog controller, but it really works well with Space Harrier and Afterburner. In fact, it really gives me that arcade feel when I play either of those games on this. And what's cool about this is the joystick can be on either the right or the left side. And this stick is just awesome. I mean, right here, like Space Harrier. Look how much fun I'm having. Now look at me playing Afterburner. Oh my goodness, I'm having so much fun. And this is the Sega Saturn Mission Stick. If you like arcade games, you want to get this. Wow, Dave, we've taken a look at a lot of these controllers, and we still have quite a few more to talk about.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, I guess it's time for intermission.
It's
That's not really right. We need to be more awesome. We're not doing it.
And here we have the Sega Dreamcast controller. You know, I love Sega, but I really don't approve of this controller very much. Let me
There's a
tell
certain
you
feeling you get
why.
when you step on the
First
court.
and foremost is the D-pad.
Make
It
a crowd
has
20
very,
pounds,
very
yeah.
sharp edges here, and it's almost
Bring people
painful to
together.
use. It really slices
That's
into your
right.
thumb. The analog stick has a huge dead spot in it, where it's just completely non-responsive until you move the stick so far. It has 4 tiny buttons on the front instead of 6 decently sized buttons. There's really nothing wrong with the L and R triggers that I can find, but whatever. It has these 2 slots in here. You can plug in something like a rumble pack to get your controller vibrating, or the memory card. In fact, this is the Sega VMU. The D-pad on the Sega VMU is better than the D-pad on the Dreamcast controller. It plugs into the slot here and it displays primitive graphics depending on what game you're playing. Doesn't really help much, it's just kind of a gimmick, but the battery life of the VMU, it takes 2 batteries, and the batteries last about 13 seconds, and if the batteries run out, you hear a big, long beep every time you turn on your Dreamcast. And another thing about this controller is that the cord comes out of the bottom. That's not a good design. Why does it do this? I know it's because this stuff's on top, but I really think this controller could have been much better thought out. I'm disappointed in you, Sega.
And this is the fishing controller for the Sega Dreamcast. Why I bought this controller, I'm not 100% sure. I really did like Sega Bass Fishing, and then they came out with marine fishing. So I guess I have 2 games that it uses, but god dang, the last time I played those games was 10 years ago. But those, as far as I know, are the only games it used. Actually, that's not true, because somebody, some weird creepy guy, beat Soul Calibur using this controller, if you can believe it.
This is the Xbox Controller S. It's a redesign of the original Xbox controller. In fact, I think it was the original Xbox controller for the system when it was released in Japan, but I'm not sure. Anyway, this is a very good redesign. It has 2 analog sticks here, and they work very well. They're very precise, very easy to use. The D-pad isn't very good. It's pretty stiff, but you know, it'll do. I've felt worse. It has these kind of glassy type round buttons here. They're okay, nothing really to complain about. Then it has a black and a white button here. You have to have a black and a white button for racial harmony. And it has shoulder triggers. And of course you plug your Xbox Live microphone in here. But the original Xbox controller, geez, I almost need a forklift to lift this thing. It's huge! Jeez! It has 2 analog sticks, just like the other ones, but they're shaped differently than each other. I have no idea why. And this D-pad, I don't know what it's supposed to be, but it's just a mess. It's shaped very oddly. The buttons are oval shaped and they're kind of at an odd angle. It's just horrible. Your black and white buttons are up here, and the Xbox logo, you know, I guess is so big just in case you forget what system you're playing. You know, you can see this thing from Mars, but I just don't know why they wanted it so huge. No one likes it snowing. Well, actually, I think there are 3 people in the entire world that actually prefer this big brute of an Xbox controller over the controller S.
Wow, and isn't this awesome? This is a PlayStation 2 fighting pad, obviously, with a Kuma on it. Capcom released, and it has 6 buttons on the face for all your Capcom fighting games. And the cool thing about this, of course, is that you can use it on your PS3 with this awesome adapter that uses a USB plug.
And this is the Nintendo GameCube controller. What is up with this button layout?
Good
It
lord.
looks like someone loaded
All right,
down
take a
with
break.
shotgun
I'll be back at it in a minute.
controller, and this is how it landed.
Woo!